You know, Russ, it doesn't take much to get me miffed.
I know that.
And something completely innocuous just really irked me. Yesterday in the morning, I was just, checking the news online, and, through Twitter, and somebody had linked one of these mini documentaries that ESPN does, which are normally pretty good. The 30 for 30s are great.
Mm-hmm.
This one was an E60, and it was on. The title of it was May 1st, 2011, which is obviously the day that the U.S. Special Forces got bin Laden.
Right.
And the story centered on the New York Mets Philadelphia Phillies game at it's not Veteran, it's Citizens Bank Park.
Citizens Bank, yeah.
Yeah, and how the news sort of filtered out through social media as the game was going along, and how even to the players, once they learned what was going on, it's sort of the game lost meaning, even though it was a big rivalry between two NL East teams, that, the fact that the U.S. had gotten bin Laden, who was responsible for all the killings for 9/11 and a lot of other things.
Yep.
So, I mean, good premise, and it was well done, but the thing that really irked me was a reporter for ESPN was interviewed as part of the piece, and she said, we were the only show in town. We were the only major sporting event going on at that point. Now, MLB, most of the time on Sundays, they play afternoon games, and they leave that Sunday night game exclusive. So right. That, in terms of MLB, I'm sure she was correct. But ESPN, in their long history of ignoring anything else that doesn't have to do with ESPN, failed to recognize the fact that most of the people hanging outside the White House after the president had said we got Osama bin Laden, they were Washington Capitals fans. There was a Capitals Tampa Bay playoff game on May the 1st, and they spilled out after, I think it was an overtime game, they spilled out after that game. They found out the news, and a lot of them marched to the White House, and they were hanging all over the trees, and they were near the fence, and they were chanting USA, USA. Excuse me, is the NHL not a major sporting event anymore?
Look, I mean, I certainly remember the day, but I really only remember the speech and the after stuff that you just mentioned. I remember that outside the White House. I may have even watched that Mets-Phillies game, and I'll be honest, it wasn't like a lasting memory. I don't even think it's good enough to do a show on, to be honest. But if they did, and they didn't mention hockey, then they're incorrect.
Yeah, it was a mini. It was like about 15 minutes long. So it was just
even so, it's like
it's like the one they did. You remember the one that they did on the Honus Wagner card, the T203, the Keith Olbermann which was great, but it was like 15, 20 minutes. So it wasn't something they could do a half-hour show on.
Yeah, I mean, 15 minutes, sure, why not? But they definitely should be factual, and it seems like they went out of their way to leave hockey out.
Yeah, and I didn't look at the NBA schedule, but I'm sure there was probably an NBA playoff game on May the 1st. Sorry, ESPN. Just because you have the footage from the baseball game and just because you have reporters covering it doesn't mean it was the only show in town. There was an NHL game, and they were outside the White House. So you should have acknowledged it, and by not doing it, it's another in a long line of things where you don't show highlights. You've got like one person in your hockey department anymore, right now. To me, it just really irks me that that's like the worldwide leader in sports, and they don't even recognize.
Well, let's forget about that. They're no longer the worldwide leader, and let's retitle that ESPN history.
Yes.
Leave it at that.
Okay, let's move on. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, May 15th, 2017.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Well, we had the beginnings of the Eastern and Western Conference Final in the NHL. Russ, let's start with the game last night. The Anaheim Ducks bounced back from an overtime loss to Nashville in Game 1 with a pretty good effort in a 5-3 victory over the Predators at the Pond. in game 2. So now the series is 1-1 going back to Nashville. The center of the game last night, I know that Nashville jumped out to a 2-0 lead. Anaheim came back, tied the game. Nashville took the lead again, and then Anaheim scored 3 goals to close out the game. The center of it appeared to be the battle between Ryan Kessler and Ryan Johansson, who ironically they have the same agent, but apparently the agent's going to have to keep one in one corner and one in the other because these guys don't like each other after 2 games. And now we got to also factor that they played against these 2 teams played against each other in the first round of the playoffs last year, so I'm sure animosity is still there. Kessler, asked by Christine Simpson about him playing against Johansson, I play the game hard, and he doesn't like that. Johansson's response was, I don't know how you cheer for a guy like that. Sucks when you have to pull a stick out of your groin every shift. Russ, this is a psychological game as much as it is a battle between an offensive player and a defensive player. Johansson is losing the psychological game right now. Yeah,
there's no question. You don't want to mention that. You could say he's just a pest and leave it at that, and that would have been better. But look, he said what was on his mind. It's not like Kessler's been completely perfect at his job. I mean, Johansson has 4 points. So, he's been effective. It's just maybe he hasn't been as effective as he was last series because Kessler's there. And it probably does give Anaheim some confidence. And so, I think it's helped Anaheim. I just think Anaheim's overall grittiness has helped them because that game, if they didn't have that, they could have been down 2-0 in that series, and that would have been huge. They weren't, though. And so we still have to look at Anaheim and say, there is something to the experience factor, the grit factor, the having been there factor, and it definitely helped them in that game, and I still think it will help them in the series. Now, the only one who doesn't have that to fall back on is John Gibson, and I felt like, after those 2 goals, which, again, maybe one of them you want to blame on Gibson, fine, I don't care, but end of the day, he outplayed Pekka Rinne. Rinne helped Anaheim get back in that game with at least one of those goals. And again, goalies aren't perfect anymore. We no longer are in the era where you're going to tell me that your goalie won you the Stanley Cup. It's rare. It's really rare.
I thought the Nick Ritchie goal was pretty weak. I mean, it was a long shot that went high, and okay, goalies are going to let those in, but I thought it was not a particularly, great. It was a great shot in terms of its power, but I don't think it's a great shot in terms. I mean, Rene should have stopped it. That's all I can say. But
and that sort of helped. That sort of helped the, the momentum swing too.
Yeah, I mean, just as an overall view, I mean, I think Nashville. I don't know whether they can battle Anaheim in terms of physicality. I mean, obviously Anaheim has a big advantage up the middle with Getzlaf and Kessler 1-2. You saw some little sniping back and forth from Nashville, like a guy like Forsberg, who spears Silfverberg in the groin and doesn't get called. I mean, that kind of stuff eventually will come back to bite you.
Yeah.
I think Anaheim I don't think they're intimidating them, but I think that, they're definitely laying the body more. And I think that eventually could slow down that Nashville defense. I mean, they're going to concentrate on young.
Slowed them down, and I could tell you, I was noticing the same way that you chip block in football. They were doing that every time they saw somebody. They gave them a little hit, and you know what? It did slow them down by the 3rd period. There's no question in my mind. And so, to me, it is a good game plan because Nashville probably is a little faster, and Nashville may have a little more finesse. So that's what they have to do to sort of level the playing field. And I think they're going to continue to do that, and it's going to be a real battle mentally and physically for Nashville to get out of this series.
Yeah, I mean, I think the battle for Nashville is to maintain their composure because, I mean, how many annoying guys can you have on one team? I mean, Perry is annoying. Vermette, in a way, is annoying. Kessler is the most annoying.
Here's the thing about Vermette. I don't think he's annoying, but I think it should annoy fans of other teams that he ends up on an Anaheim who already had 2 really good centers, and now they could literally put out either Kessler or they could put out Getzlaf or Vermette, Vermette is the shark of the league now in faceoffs, and win all these huge faceoffs. This is why I thought the Rangers should have gotten Vermette a couple of seasons ago when they were really in desperate need, and they're still pretty much in desperate need of a center that could win faceoffs. It's huge. people, I know this is where the analytics sometimes doesn't meet the road with other stats, but you know what? You saw last night, faceoffs mattered, and Vermette seemed to win every big one in the third period, and Nashville just couldn't get back on track because they would lose the puck in the offensive zone.
Yeah. The one dangerous part of the third period was they had Nate Thompson out there, and they iced the puck, I think, 2 or 3 times. They didn't have, because Carlisle, what he did was really smart. He had either Kessler or Getzlaf and Vermette on the ice at the same time.
So they could switch around for faceoffs. Yeah.
Right, on defensive draws, either left side or right side, or if one got kicked out. So they had, but for that couple minute span, and the best chance that Nashville had in the third period, that mad scramble, I think it was around 6 minutes left to go in the third period, where I'm looking at this and I'm saying to Gibson, because Gibson was down on the ice, he was prone, and I'm like, get up. He was
but
lying.
He was still covering the above with his foot and with the glove. He was doing that, and you know what? Sometimes goalies, I don't worry about it if a goalie's down, if they're used to being down. And he seemed pretty comfortable being down, Gibson. So I don't think that was a big problem. Here's the one thing we've noticed, and fans could always say it's so easy and they could yell at the screen. I've noticed that players in close have had a very hard time elevating the puck over most goalies and over their goalie pads, because there's been a lot of situations in a lot of these games where if they could have done that, they would get a goal or a game-winning goal or a game-tying goal, and they haven't been able to do it with great regularity. You've noticed that too, I'm sure.
Yeah, and one little stat that I thought was impressive, because Silfverberg has been really good in the playoffs. This is how good he's been in the playoffs, and not only just with Anaheim, but I think going back to his time with Ottawa, 36 playoff games, 36 points. That's impressive. That's really impressive.
We should give ourselves a little pat on the back, because on Off the Post, which is probably month and a half ago, 2 months ago, when we had Julie Stewart-Banks on, we talked about Silfverberg and how he was really having an amazing year, and it would be probably impossible even at that point to think about leaving him exposed, and now it's impossible. Like, they can't.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that later in the show, because we're going to start going through the 30 teams right now and who potentially they could lose in expansion, or more correctly, who they should protect. Right. And what moves can come off of who they protect and who they don't protect. The other series, Game 2, is tonight. Anybody who was watching that, I think if you had a pillow, you were out. I was driving back from Syracuse listening to that game, and I almost ended up off the road because it was that boring. 2-1 Ottawa win, and that's the way Ottawa has to win, Russ. I mean, they're going to have to. Guy Boucher is going to put you to sleep with that damn 1-3-1, and that's what they did. And in the overtime, Bobby Ryan scores a
Cherry Hill.
Basically a breakaway goal.
You have to say Bobby Ryan from Cherry Hill.
From Cherry. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, didn't know that. That was patented from Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Okay. And so Ottawa leads the series 1-0. I picked Pittsburgh in this series. I picked Pittsburgh in a short series, so maybe it's going to be a little longer than I thought. I mean, the thing is again, Ottawa, the 1-3-1 enables a team with limited talent to win games, and I'm not insulting Ottawa. I don't think they have as much.
It's their game plan. It's fine. It's a strategy. I don't think there's anything insulting about it. I think that's what won it for them in that game, and that's why when people said, "Well, I don't think the 1-3-1 bothered the Rangers," yeah, it did. It didn't bother them every minute of every game. There were times where they broke through that. Pittsburgh didn't do a good enough job of breaking through that. I'm pretty sure this game tonight they will. I'm not worried about Pittsburgh. Now, if they go down 2-0, will I be worried? I still won't be worried. That's the crazy part. But I did tell you that Ottawa needed that first game to sort of at least change the narrative a little bit, and they did, and that's a big win for them.
Yeah, and you can't. Okay, it's a 2-1 game in overtime, and I heard some people say, "Well, they got to make the switch to Murray to back from Fleury." Like, Fleury was fantastic in the third period. He made I think it was 14 saves. I mean, you're not switching the goaltender in this series unless Fleury got
4 goals in the first period, something crazy.
Yeah, no, they're not doing it. They're sticking with Fleury right now.
And Murray wouldn't expect to either, by the way. Like, that's how he got his job. Like, goalies are very cool about this, and they understand. And you know what? When it's in overtime, it's anybody's game. Anything can happen. It was a breakaway goal. And good for Ryan. The way he buried it, that was fantastic. But if that didn't happen, would Pittsburgh have won? Maybe. I mean, just the way it is.
Now, it doesn't sound like Trevor Daley will be back tonight. There are reports that he may be back by Game 3. Same thing with Edwin. So the Pittsburgh lineup isn't as long and deep as it normally is. I think that Pittsburgh has to win this. I mean, not that they can't win it if they go down 2-0, because we've seen teams win series down 2-0 already in this playoffs. But I just think they have to somewhat break this 1-3-1 or find some sort of solution to it. Again, use somebody as the stretch guy like Kessel with his blazing speed. He's used to hanging at that blue line, waiting for the breakout pass. And if they can do that, then that might work. But I mean, apparently, Sullivan was working on breaking the trap and on sort of dealing with the clutter in the neutral zone. Mm-hmm. Maybe that will work. But the other thing is, I mean, how much can Craig Anderson continue to be as good as he's been throughout the rest of this playoffs? Because he was really good on Saturday.
He's on a roll. I think he could maintain this. I don't think there's an issue.
Okay, so we'll watch that game tonight with interest. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Let's move just briefly to the World Championships, because there was something that you had heard regarding Henrik Lundqvist that piqued your interest.
Yeah, he basically said that this could be the last time for the World Championships that he represents Sweden. It's getting close to maybe, the last time that he could do that. And if you think about it, it's probably true, because he knows he's not going to the Olympics this year. What is he, 33, 34? So the next Olympics is 2022. Yeah, I got to believe he probably won't be the starting goalie then, may not even be on the roster then.
Yeah, or if he is, he'll probably be like in an emeritus position while, whoever, I can't even think of what, Jakob Markstrom or the Buffalo goaltender, Robin Lehner is the starter for Sweden. I mean, that's possible, but I don't know. I mean, I brought up this to you when we were talking before the show about the Olympic thing popping up because of Renee Fassel's commentary, and Darren Drager from TSN interviewed Fassel after he had made it was a press conference. He had said that there was a possibility that the NHL was going to come, that he was being optimistic, and Drager reported that he got a nice phone call from Gary Bettman, and the nice phone call was basically, "Shut the hell up, Renee.
Yeah,
we're not coming." So, I mean, people like, I know that Evgeny Kuznetsov made some sort of statement about if Alex Ovechkin goes to the Olympics and if other players.
Actually, Lundqvist is 35.
35, okay. So he'd be 40. Yeah,
he knows.
Yeah, he knows. I mean, yeah, that was probably his last crack. And honestly, Sidney Crosby is 28, 29.
Yeah, right in that range.
I mean, will he make the Olympics as a 34-year-old?
Yeah, he will probably.
I mean, he might be, in 5 years, he might be their third or fourth line center, a guy who's more of a checker and that type, then, I'm sure he'll probably still be scoring goals. But I mean, for a lot of players, missing the 2018 Olympics is maybe their last kick at the can when it comes to that. But again, how important is this? I don't think
it seems to be hardwired, but again, I just go back to when's the last time Team Sweden did something for Henrik Lundqvist? Like, not that they have to. I'm just saying the New York Rangers have been paying him this whole time. The NHL has been paying him this whole time. Yeah. I get that there's nationalism at stake. I get that, and you want to wear the colors for your country. Yeah. But again, if you think about it, for the times that these players play for those teams and possibly win a gold medal, it's fleeting. And so, it's not their day job, that's for sure.
Well, and again, we talked about this, and I somehow think that the landscape would be a little different because there have been 5 Olympic games since the NHL decided to go in Nagano in '98, and you've had Canada win 3 times, you've had the Czechs win in '98, and you had the Swedes. If one of those victories was the U.S., with NBC, getting the ratings and all the excitement that would come with it, I have a feeling that the chances of the NHL going to the Olympics would have been higher with that, because that would have driven ratings. That would have been the story. It would be like the Miracle on Ice happening again. 30 years after the Miracle on Ice, the U.S. win in Vancouver. That would have
helped.
It would have helped. It would have driven the narrative. Whereas I think, and I know watching Hockey Night in Canada and listening to a lot of, radio programs from the Toronto area and in Canada that, they're still miffed that they're not going to the Olympics. And I think they want to go to the Olympics because it's a chance for them to show off their dominance in their sport. And I get that. But honestly, that doesn't drive ratings in the U.S.
No, it doesn't.
And I think that's one of the reasons why, there was no positive when it comes to the owners in terms of taking off 2 weeks and letting their players go to South Korea. What do they get out of it? They don't get tickets.
NBC is not looking to have hockey for the Canadian television market. No offense to Canada. There's a lot less people. They have no way of really accounting for it. They don't get advertising for the Canadian market. It's all about the American television market. That's the reality. And so, you had to have done something to make that better. They didn't. Some people blame the league for that. I don't think it's the league's fault. I just think it's a combination of things. But here's something I bring up. So, like with Marcus Naslund, I remember he always would say, well, I always want to go back and finish my career in Moto. And I used to say, well, go ahead. You've already made tons of money in the NHL. He did do that. How many games do you think Marcus Naslund played when he finishes his career with Moto?
Probably less than a season.
29 games.
Yeah.
And he had 10 goals. And that's my basic point is, he played till the bitter end in the NHL, made a lot of money. If these guys would never come to the NHL and just play in Moto, they would still be on Olympic teams, but that would be once every 4 years. What would that do for feeding their families and doing everything else?
Or the World Championships.
Or the World Championships, yeah.
Right, which and okay. I don't want to slag on the World Championships, but
no, I mean, look, when they have younger players, I think it's better. Like last year was great because there were some rookies in there. Now it's just, again, the best of the worst, and players come and they play for 2 weeks.
Right. I think the motivation for the World Championships isn't national pride. It was 2 weeks with the vacation in Paris.
Right.
Honestly, I really. I know that some managers are over there and some head coaches like Mike Babcock who are over there.
Dave Haxtell's over there, yeah.
Right, evaluating players. But I think in general the players are going over there because, it's not overly physical hockey. And after playing in the playoffs, you don't want to be crashed and banged constantly. It's mostly freewheel, open ice on the international ice surface, so not as much contact. Yeah, I mean,
let's be real. Like Henrik Lundqvist won yesterday, right? After the game, he's having wine and cheese at one of the best places in Paris. That's what he's doing.
Sure. I don't blame him in the slightest.
But that's why he's at the World Championships, not necessarily all because he's playing for Sweden. It happens to be a great venue, too. There's no question about that. I think it's partially because of the Sweden thing, but I'm also having some fun with what you're saying is right. A lot of guys that I think normally had passed on the World Championships, when they got eliminated, decided last minute, hey, I'll come and play for a week in Paris. Come on.
Yeah. Now, Canada on the weekend, and this is the preliminary round, so it doesn't mean as much as if they had lost like next week.
Sorry.
Yeah. Lost 3-2 in overtime to the Swiss. And I mean, they played Norway today, and usually, John Cooper scrambles the line. This is like, oh my God, it's emergency time at the World Championship. I mean, give me a break. You lost one game and you lost in overtime. So Fabrice Herzog has the highlight of his professional hockey career by scoring 2 goals against Canada.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. It's just I can't get overly worked up about it.
Yeah.
I've watched like 5 minutes of the World Championship so far. Now, maybe getting closer to the end, I'll watch more. We'll see. It's a battle.
I watched a bit of the comeback the U.S. had against Latvia. But, I mean, I
got to tell you, I saw people taking bets last minute. They were all heavy in on Latvia, weren't they? Yeah. Yeah.
Big favorites. Yeah. Okay, let's change to the goaltending.
Who was in net for Latvia?
Oh, God. I don't know.
Boy, it was a real memorable game, wasn't it, Mike? Okay. And you remember everything.
It was. I can't remember how to pronounce his name. So I remember if you would have told me the name. Gergensons played for Latvia. It was Hellebuck for the U.S. Anyway, sorry. Okay, on the goaltending scene, a little bit of interesting news. Now, we talked about Ben Bishop's contract with Dallas last week. Note that I just saw regarding this. Apparently, Bishop was not the first choice of GM Jim Nill. He, like Carolina, was in on Scott Darling. Carolina's Ron Francis outbid Dallas. They offered up a third-round pick. Dallas did not want to give up a third-round pick for Darling, and Darling gets
because Jim Nill values picks. That's why.
That and the thing was, it's like Darling is 2 years younger than Bishop.
Mm-hmm.
He signed a 4-year contract. Bishop signs a 6-year contract. Although, this is the thing. It was supposed to be a 5-year deal. They added the 6th year to spread out the cap hit.
Right.
He's got, I think the money being paid in the 6th year of that deal is $3 million, which means it's really a 5-year deal. And unless he's playing great in year 5 and 6, he's probably getting bought out of that final year.
Right. And the thing is, and let's be realistic. At least Bishop has won a Vezina. He's got a lot more playoff experience, just a lot more experience in general. Darling, we have an idea of what he might be, but he's even played less than Cam Talbot before he signed his deal.
Yeah, I don't get it. I'm very skeptical of Scott Darling being a number 1 goaltender. I'm in the minority.
I'm not skeptical. I'm just saying, get the kind of deal he did. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm definitely in the minority here because I don't think he's a number 1 goaltender, and maybe Ron Francis and the Hurricanes will prove me wrong. But he played really well as a backup with a great defense in front of him and a great team in front of him. And you can say the same thing about Talbot, and Talbot played wonderfully for Edmonton after a year or so of struggle. But I don't know. There are other backup goaltenders in this league that I think have better chances of being number 1s than Scott Darling does. Now, and we talked a little bit about this last week. I don't know where Calgary is going. And our friend Anthony Mangione had a theory regarding Philadelphia that boggled my mind. He said that he thinks Philadelphia is going to go after Jonathan Bernier.
Yeah, I think there's something to that.
I think there's something to it, but remember, Ron Hextall was in LA as assistant general manager when they either drafted Bernier or while Bernier was there, so he knows him well. And the situation with Philadelphia right now is they have a young, really good goaltender in Carter Hart, who's probably 2 to 3 years away from being ready for the NHL. And basically, I think that they didn't want to spend 4, 5, 6 years on a Bishop. They want a sort of stopgap goaltender to get them through the next couple of years and then hand it over to Hart. I get that, but I don't think you're getting a good enough goaltender that you can win in that 2 years with Bernier.
Yeah, Bernier still would come in being the backup to start anyhow.
You think he'd be the backup to Neuwirth?
I do. Really? I do, because Hackstall likes Neuwirth. They could say whatever they want, but you know that Neuwirth will get more starts. And so I think Bernier would have to know that coming in based on the way they used Neuwirth this year. So I do think that would be the case. But beyond that, they're not they're not paying Jonathan Bernier and saying you're a guaranteed number 1. There's no way that the Flyers or Hackstall would do that.
Yeah, I think there's just as good a chance that Bernier stays in Southern California where he and his family like staying. If he gets, and then he's not going to get $4 million because that was a contract to be paid for a starting goaltender, and he's right now at best a 1B. But I would bet he'd get a contract for around maybe $2 million a year. And he could either go back to LA or stay in Anaheim and make that kind of money rather than going to Philadelphia. Unless Philadelphia was prepared to say, you're the starter. If they're going to say, well, you're going to be in the mix, then why the hell would he come back east? And why would he go to a place that is a sausage grinder for goaltenders?
No, it's fair. It's all fair. Hey, I've got an interesting one. So Mike Harrington, Buffalo News, complaining about the ticket prices
yes,
for the Sabres this week.
Oh, yes.
But the thing is, now here's the thing. Who didn't think that their ticket prices weren't going up after they made some firings and they're still paying these guys and they hired? Did they really think that was coming out of administrative expenses? Let's be realistic about sports these days.
Well, here's the problem, Russ. I for just to tell everybody beforehand, from my point of view, I am a Sabre season ticket holder, which I split with a number of friends, so
Right.
I don't take the cost on myself. But the ticket prices in the 300 level that I have went from $2,120 to $2,480, so almost a $300 increase. This is a team that has not made the playoffs in how many years? So that is the point.
Is it
that is the
what is it?
No, they I think it was
No, they just made it 3-4 years ago. It's like 4 or 5 years, right?
Right. But this is a team that finished 30th twice.
Mm-hmm.
And hasn't, and then 23rd and 22nd. So they haven't shown anything in terms of, they've shown talent. They brought in Eichel, they brought in Reinhardt, they got some good young players, but incomplete seasons, no success, and they raised the ticket prices. I think the percentage was 4%, but some went up a little more, some went up a little less. People in Buffalo are complaining about the fact that they're not getting the product, and the money and the cost is being increased. I can only tell you from my point of view that, because I consult with the friends that I split the tickets with, we're 50-50 about whether we're renewing our tickets, because the product is just not there. So
sure, I get all that. That part's fair. But I think everybody should have been able to realize when they cleaned house and they hired new guys, that they were going to be paying the freight. This is the funny thing about fans. When you're a fan and you're like asking for, let's say you're a Ranger fan, you're asking for Alain Vigneault to be fired when they just gave him an extension. If they do that, who do you think who do you think the cost is getting passed on to in the end? It's the fan. The cost will always get passed on to the fan. And so, like this article from Harrington, hey, he might, fans might be happy that he's trumpeting their cause, but that's not realistic for business. Because if you go back, any franchise would do the same thing. There's very few franchises that don't make some sort of increase. And like I said, the Rangers that one time made a rollback, and that was the one time. and Jim Dolan stood for his word, and that was interesting. It was probably the only time we'll ever witness that. So that's what I'm saying. It's just, if you think about it, you have to look at it logically and just say, those days are gone. And so if you're a fan, maybe think twice before you say, fire that guy in the first year of his deal, because you're going to be paying for it.
Well, if the owner was on government assistance, I would say fine. But the owner is a multi-billionaire who's pulling money out of the ground with gas and oil. So nobody has any sympathy for the Pegulas in terms of finance, because this is a hobby that they're paying for, Russ. This is not their living. And that's the thing. It's like, okay, you want to fire your coach, you want to fire your general manager, that's fine. You pay the freight. Don't pass it on to the.
But they're not going to do that.
Right, of course they're not, because they're sports owners, and sports owners are going to find a way to allay the cost of their operations on the fans. But the fans,
right.
I mean, I'm telling you right now, there was a waiting list of thousands of people when it came to the Sabres. There's not going to be that long a waiting list, or even any waiting list at all after this, because I'm sure a lot of people will be in the same boat that my friends and I are going to be in, and dumping the season tickets. I don't think that,
And that's your only way out of it as a fan. Either you do that or just move on, because that's it.
And I originally purchased the tickets for a surreptitious reason, which I've mentioned before on a webcast, because the Sabres have variable pricing, and I didn't feel like paying $500 for 3 Leaf games.
Right.
And because I'm a season ticket holder, I pay significantly less. So anyway, all right. Speaking of Buffalo and and their administrative costs, a list of 5 potential coaches, was revealed on Hockey Night in Canada Saturday Night Headlines over the weekend. The 5 names were former Sabres Bob Bugner, who coached at Windsor, and I think he's an assistant coach with San Jose right now. Nashville assistant and former Sabre Phil Housley. Todd Reardon, who's an assistant coach, I think, with the Washington Capitals. Current assistant coach Rick Tocchet in Pittsburgh. And Jeff Ward, an assistant coach with the New Jersey Devils. Of that list, I mean, Tocchet's been the one that's been talked about the most. Let's say, I think, they're all qualified, but which one do you think? Would
I
you
think they should go with Bugner because he was a defenseman, correct?
Yes, correct.
Right, and so he understands that part of the game. If you think about it, defensive-minded coaches are really the best coaches to have right now. I know everybody wants that up-tempo offense and everything else. That's great, but you still have to have defense to win in the NHL. And I like the defensive-minded coach, the same as the NFL, because I think the NHL's gone that way. Right. And I think Bugner would be good. He'd be good for Ristolainen. He'd be good for all their young defensemen. Yeah. And actually, the Sabres are another team that could be a little grittier with their forwards as far as playing defense, and he would probably help with that.
Well, Bugner gained his fame in Buffalo as part of that really tough team that Ted Nolan coached. This was the Ray, May, Barnaby, Bugner. That was that team. So, I mean, he's got that connection to Buffalo. So I think that in terms of selling him as a coach, and he,
I will tell you this: I've interviewed Phil Housley. I've seen him coach. I think he's terrific, and he's also a defensive-minded guy, even though he's an offensive defenseman.
Right.
I just think Bugner has this sort of toughness that he exudes that I think Buffalo needs. And if that's the one change from Bilesma that's a positive, that would be the change.
Yeah, I mean, I think you get the toughness in terms of the persona from Tocchet as well. I just don't know how good.
But I don't know if he has the same. I mean, we've seen him a couple times. We haven't seen a huge impact. Bugner's never had a shot. Sometimes it's better to see the guy who hasn't had a shot than the guy who's had a shot but limited but hasn't really had an impact yet.
Yeah, I remember Tocchet took over for Barry Melrose after he bailed after 8 games. I think it was.
That tire fire,
Yeah, exactly. And he did, he got along. He played Stamkos. Not that takes a great genius to do, because that was the problem with Melrose. He decided, I'm not going to play Steven Stamkos.
Right.
But he did do that. He got along well with the players there, but it was a move from him to Cooper that brought that team to the level that they have been over the last couple of years, along with an influx of talent. So I think Bugner would be a great choice. I think he'd be a popular choice here, but I don't think that there's going to be a choice made until probably after the combine that we're at the beginning of June. I think it's going to be between them and the draft, depending on the availability. Housley's still coaching with Nashville, and Tocchet's still coaching with Pittsburgh. So Reardon is another name that is on the radar for the Florida Panthers job, according to a report. The 3 names being bandied about there are Reardon, former Montreal head coach Michel Therrien, and Jim Montgomery, the coach of the University of Denver.
I think that's the coach they should go with. I think
I want Therrien just to piss Eck off.
No, but I think Montgomery is the guy. I think he has shown everything he could show you at the college level. Won another national championship. I think he's deserved a chance. This is why I'm just never understood why over the years Mike Eaves never got a shot. He was so successful at Wisconsin, but I guess it was a different era and teams just didn't believe you can do it. Now that they've seen Dave Haxtell do it, I think he's sort of paved the way a little easier way. I know it's happened before, but very, very seldom. I think there was one other college coach, Herb Brooks, and who else?
Bob Johnson.
And that's it. I mean, and then after that, it went dead for a while, right?
And I'm surprised. His career, he just ended his college career, but I'm surprised that in the last 20 years, somebody didn't give Red Berenson a shot unless he didn't want to leave Michigan.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we're going to do this every show from now until just before the draft. We're going to look at one NHL team and analyze what their dilemma will be with expansion. We'll start today with Anaheim. Obviously they're focused on the playoffs right now, but we're going to look at their situation in terms of protection and what they might do based on who they protect in terms of maybe trade before the expansion draft or who they might lose. Now, I wrote something regarding the Leafs about the Ducks. Because they have a dilemma, especially on defense, Russ. Now, this is the thing. There are 2 really good young prospects. Shea Theodore and Brandon Montour are exempt. So is Jakob Larson, their first-round pick from 2015.
Okay.
They have 3 defensemen. 2 of them signed to long-term deals in Vatanen and Lindholm. Cam Fowler, who has another year left in his contract, but I'm certain based on the year that he had this year, they're going to try to lock him up on a long-term deal sometime over the summer. They all have to be protected, or they will be protected.
Mm-hmm.
They also have a no-movement clause with the last year of Kevin Bieksa's contract.
Right.
And Josh Manson, 25 years old, playing really well in the playoffs right now, also would have to be protected. There are other guys like Simone Dupre, who's been injured all year, a few other players. But those are the main 5. If they buy out, or if Bieksa waives his no-move clause, that doesn't help them if they protect 8 skaters rather than 7, 3, and 1. If they protect 7, 3, and 1, Manson gets exposed. If they protect 8 skaters and they protect Manson, then they have 3 no-move clauses at forward: Kessler, Perry, Getzlaf. They protect Raquel, who's one of their best forwards, but they would expose Silfverberg. So right now, unless they make a trade before the expansion draft, they're going to lose one of Manson or Silfverberg.
Yeah, I think they could lose Manson. I don't think that's a big deal. That's what I would do.
Well, and this was the thing. Yes, with the prospects that they have, they could lose Manson and not really sweat it. But with the market the way it is in terms of defensemen right now, and with Manson playing well in the playoffs, this is an opportunity for Bob Murray to say, okay, I can protect 7, 3, and 1.
Mm-hmm.
I can either buy out or get Bieksa to waive his no move. If I go 7, 3, and 1, I can protect Silfverberg. I can protect another forward. And that's where I'm saying I think what he's going to do is he's going to trade Manson for a forward.
Maybe. If he can get one, and he probably can. I mean, that's fine. But if you're going to trade him for a forward, you got to trade him for a forward you're hoping not to have to protect.
No, I mean, because if they're protecting 7, they're protecting the 3 no-move guys. They're protecting Raquel. They're protecting Silfverberg, and they have 2 more spots. Now, I mean, they don't have to protect Richie because Richie is still exempt. So that means protecting.
Yeah, I'm going to get crazy here and say that I think they would trade him for a pick or for a prospect that's exempt, because then if they want to hold on to Kerdiles, they could. I know that they probably had a million opportunities to get rid of him and never have, and I think he's a guy that still can provide them something down the road. They do need to hold on to as many forwards as they can, because that is a team that is so deep on defense and not that deep on offense. I mean, that's really their issue.
Not my article yesterday. It's actually on Hockey Buzz right now. It associates Manson with the Leafs, and that we've the mention of James Van Riemsdyk to Anaheim has been ad nauseum over the last 12 months. It makes too much sense because short-term commitment. They're a sort of a now team. He played for Randy Carlyle in Toronto. He would probably be a really good fit either with Getzlaf or with Kessler. But the thing is, they do have some good young wingers, and Kasha and Richie, and
I'm just thinking Kerdiles played against Edmonton. He's 23 years old. Forgot to set my phone off. He's 23 years old. It just seems like it would be a good idea that if you could clear that spot, hold on to him, because you don't know where your offense is going to be next year as your core keeps aging. He's got a little bit of size to him. I'm telling you, I don't think.
No, I mean that might be the way that they go. And see, the thing is, there might be a bidding war in terms of there are some people who are saying that what they will do is they will trade Asami Vatanen and protect Manson along with Fowler.
Vatanen scored that goal.
I think it's more the fact that they want, if they trade Vatanen, it's to open up the cap space to sign Fowler. But
let's see what Fowler signs for. He may not be as high as people think. He may like it where he is, which is a nice area to live in, and maybe he gives them a pretty good deal. I'm not willing to just throw Vatanen away yet.
No, and I think Fowler would get about $5 million. Yeah. $5 million 5 million times 5 years. I mean, that's including the Southern California discount that Tanner Pearson took with LA.
Yeah, I'm sure they have some salaries dropping off, and I think they. Let's see.
Well, yeah, I mean, Bieksa drops off after. Yeah, I mean, Bieksa drops off after next year at $4 million. Bernier drops off this year, 4.1. But
is Fowler up this year or is he up next year?
Is who?
Fowler.
Fowler's up after next year.
Right. So you could give him the extension for when the Bieksa contract drops off.
Right. Fowler's making $4 million next year. So is Bieksa. You can sign Fowler to the extension, and basically it would just make up the money would be made up by what Bieksa is being. Plus Clayton Stoner's falling off after next year too, so that's another 3.25.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I think they could swing it.
Yeah, in terms of the protection situation, I think they're probably going to have. They're not going to lose Silverberg.
No.
In the expansion draft, they will be prepared to lose Manson, but I think that they will because it's just good asset management. If you trade Manson, and there are a lot of teams out there looking for a defenseman, that they will get something good back, maybe even an exempt player. The question is, like, for a team like, and I raised this question on my article, is whether teams out there think Josh Manson can be maybe a 4, like a 3-4, or if he's limited to being a 5.
I think a 4 is fair.
Yeah, he's a right-hand shot. He's big. For his size, he's mobile. Good hockey bloodlines. Dave Manson, former Hawk and Leaf, was his dad, or is his dad. So I mean, I think he's a player at 25 years old who's a good fit for a lot of teams.
I mean, here's the thing: if you really think about it, they're going to be picking 27, 8, 9, 30, something in that range.
Right.
And so maybe they get another first for Manson. And maybe that's worth it. Maybe they can move up in this draft and get an offensive player.
Maybe they can move up. But that's the thing.
Or just move up, yeah. Or just use Manson to move up, yeah.
When they're between a rock and a hard place when it comes to losing them or trading them, that's not good. That's not a good negotiating position to get to get a really great return. I mean, teams will want them. Teams will want a defenseman, and they'll pay for it, but they're not going to overpay for it because Anaheim's got to make the decision. Do you want this, or do you want to lose them for nothing?
Right. I get that part. I'm just looking up something real quick. I'm trying to see in Anaheim's system where the future offense is going to come from. Sam Steele. Maybe Sam Steele, but he's years away. He's still
he's 2-3 years away.
3 years away.
But they do. I mean, okay. Getzlaf, Kessler, Perry, they're all aging, and they're still all effective. But I mean, right now the core group of their forwards is Raquel, is Silverberg, is Richie, is Kasha. I mean, they've got young forwards. I don't know if any of them are superstars.
I mean, Richie was really the last of the offensive guys. Maybe you get a little something out of Miro Aaltonen someday, but he's the last of the offensive guys other than Cordelis.
Aaltonen signed with Toronto.
Oh, that's right. So other than Cordelis, who maybe is going to give them something, except for last year when they had Max Jones and Sam Steele. So they need to hold on to offensive players, and maybe they do need to move up in the draft and get more offense, because you can see as this core starts aging, they're going to have some replenishment. You're not going to be able to do it all on free agents. That's just my guess.
Okay. Just to finish the show, the Memorial Cup finalists have been decided. St. John in the Quebec League, Seattle in the WHL, which was a surprise because I think everybody thought Regina was going to be the team there. The Erie Otters in the Ontario Hockey League, and the host Windsor Spitfires. And Ross, normally the host is sort of an also-ran, but I look at Windsor this year with Day, with Logan Brown, with Bracco, with Sergachev. That's a tough team.
That's a tough team.
I mean, they have the advantage of playing at home, and that's a pretty good team. So I wouldn't be surprised if the host team wins this. Not to say it's guaranteed, because it's not.
I think Seattle's really good. I mean, I wouldn't want to count him out. Barzal is tremendous. He might be the best player in the whole tournament. I mean, so let's not count him out yet, just because they're not on a popular team. And this is the one guy who you'll really watch is Gabe Velarde on Windsor. I mean, he's another guy you got to really watch because he's going pretty high in the draft. He could actually help his draft stock in the Memorial Cup, which is a rarity. You don't always get to do that.
Right. All right. We will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m., hopefully, with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. Eklund will be back. We will probably have Peter Tessier with us so we can analyze, hopefully, a more exciting game between the Ottawa Senators and the Pittsburgh Penguins. For Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.